Welcome to Sacred Texts Summarized, where we explore the timeless wisdom woven into humanity's most revered spiritual teachings. Today, we embark on an expansive journey through the Sermon on the Mount, a passage nestled in the Gospel of Matthew that has shaped the heart of Christian spirituality for centuries. Although it emerges from a specific historical and cultural context, its luminous insights continue to speak to seekers across traditions, pointing the way to an inner transformation characterized by humility, compassion, and boundless love. Yet the sermon's radiance shines far beyond the Christian fold alone. When contemplated with an open heart, we discover that its central motifs resonate with Eastern philosophies, Jewish mysticism, Sufi poetry, and the universal human longing for truth, goodness, and unity with the sacred. So, picture a sunlit hillside in 1st century Galilee, where a humble teacher speaks in soft yet assured tones, drawing listeners, rich and poor, learned and unlearned, devout and doubtful, into a profound conversation about what it truly means to live a spiritual life. As we delve deeper, may these teachings become more than words on a page, inviting us instead into a living practice that both challenges and consoles. We begin with a set of statements often referred to as the Beatitudes, passages that form the very heart of the sermon. Each beatitude offers a paradoxical blessing, turning common assumptions upside down. Those who appear last in the eyes of the world are promised a foremost place in the divine realm. Yet, this promise is not some transaction in a distant afterlife. It speaks to a transformation already unfolding whenever one chooses humility, mercy, and surrender over arrogance, selfishness, and fear. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Here we find no condemnation of wealth in itself, but rather an invitation to radical inner poverty, an emptying out of ego and illusions. In this sense, poor in spirit resembles the Buddhist concept of shunyata, emptiness that allows for the arising of wisdom. It also echoes Sufi poets like Hafiz and Rumi, who sing of becoming poor before the beloved, stripped of all self-serving impulses, leaving only the heart's pure receptivity. This interior poverty is a paradoxical richness. When we let go of our egoic clutter, we discover an open space where divine grace naturally abides. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Although it may refer to personal grief, Jesus' statement also invites us to mourn the collective suffering of humanity. True mourning implies empathy and solidarity with all who experience anguish. In the Bhagavad Gita, the warrior Prince Arjuna grieves for the battlefield carnage he foresees, and Krishna's counsel prompts him to see beyond the changing forms of life and death. Yet Jesus' promise that mourners shall be comforted is no call to spiritual detachment devoid of feeling. Rather, it points to divine compassion that meets us in our sorrow, gently transforming it into empathy and a deeper commitment to alleviate suffering wherever it appears. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. To modern ears, meekness can sound like helplessness or submission, but this teaching suggests an inner stance of gentleness and resilience. In Taoist philosophy, Wu Wei, effortless action, symbolizes the power that flows without forcing. The meek resemble water, pliant yet unstoppable, able to carve canyons over time. Such people do not grasp at power or possessions. Instead, they align themselves with the greater harmony. Paradoxically, this alignment confers not weakness, but a profound strength capable of nurturing life. Inheriting the earth becomes more than a promise of land or prosperity. It signifies a harmonious attunement with creation, a stewardship born of respect rather than domination. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Righteousness, in biblical contexts, often implies a covenantal faithfulness, living in right relationship with God, self, and neighbor. It goes far beyond legalistic morality or superficial piety. In the Upanishads, we find a similar ardor in the term tapas, the spiritual fervor that drives one toward realization of the highest. To hunger and thirst is to feel a visceral longing. Such longing, when directed toward aligning with the divine, summons grace. It stokes an inner fire, reminding us that our spiritual life calls for our deepest commitment. Jesus' promise that we shall be filled testifies to a reciprocal dynamic at the heart of all genuine seeking. When the soul truly yearns for truth, the universe responds in abundance. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Mercy springs from recognizing our shared essence. It is the understanding that, at our core, each of us partakes in a larger, sacred life. In Buddhism, Karuna captures a similar sense of compassion that extends to all living beings, acknowledging that the boundary between self and other is fluid. In Islamic thought, one of the central names for God is Ar-Rahman, the compassionate, underscoring that mercy is an attribute integral to the divine. To practice mercy is not simply to perform nice deeds, but to continually dissolve the barriers that keep us from seeing others as ourselves. And in that softening, we discover that giving mercy and receiving mercy are intertwined. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Purity of heart in mystical traditions is often likened to a mirror. When polished and freed from the tarnish of ego, it reflects the divine effortlessly. Zen Buddhism speaks of the beginner's mind, a clear, open awareness unburdened by layers of preconception. In Jewish mysticism, the circumcision of the heart symbolizes removing any callousness that hinders our intimacy with the divine. To see God is not merely to behold a vision, but to experience an unveiling of reality. A direct perception that the sacred we once perceived as distant is actually present in all that is. This unveiling transforms how we move through the world, no longer as isolated fragments, but as participants in a grand, living unity. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Peacemaking surpasses mere conflict avoidance. It's a creative enterprise that actively sows understanding and harmony. In the Jain and Hindu principle of ahimsa, we recognize that non-violence is not passive, but requires constant discernment, courage, and love. The Sufi tradition, too, extols the one who stands as a bridge of reconciliation and love in the face of discord. To be a child of God speaks to spiritual lineage. Peacemakers reflect the very nature of the divine, who holds all opposites in an embrace of love. Their work is sacred work, bending the arc of human stories toward healing rather than division. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The sermon acknowledges the reality that walking a path of integrity often means crossing currents with worldly power structures. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches Arjuna to uphold his dharma without attachment to outcomes. So too, Jesus urges steadfastness and courage, reminding us that even when sacrifice is demanded, an inner kingdom of peace and purpose remains unassailable. This is a promise that beyond the turbulence of external condemnation lies a spiritual freedom that cannot be taken away. Following these Beatitudes, Jesus uses two striking metaphors to illustrate the vocation of those who internalize this teaching: salt and light. Salt preserves, flavors, and purifies. Light dispels darkness. In the Upanishads, we read of the Atman as the eternal light that suffuses every sentient being. Similarly, the sermon calls on each listener to allow their inner radiance to shine forth, not for personal glorification, but to illuminate the pathway for others. And like salt, we are to enhance the flavor of our communities through kindness, honesty, and the daily lived embodiment of spiritual truth. One of the most challenging aspects of the sermon is found in Jesus' exhortation to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Modern discourse often operates on the premise of identifying adversaries and besting them, whether in politics, social media, or personal relationships. Yet this radical love overturns the cycle of hatred, mirroring the Buddhist practice of metta, loving kindness, that systematically expands the circle of goodwill to include everyone: friends, neutrals, and even those who cause pain. It also resonates with Sufi ideals of seeing the beloved's face in every human countenance. Such love is not a naive surrender, but a courageous stance that insists on the possibility of transformation. We do not feed the fires of hatred. We offer water instead, trusting in love's power to dissolve enmity where violence would only deepen it. The sermon also addresses the inner dimensions of devotion and prayer. Jesus introduces a template now known as the Lord's Prayer, exhorting us to approach the divine with reverence, "Our Father in heaven," yet also to trust in God's nearness, "Hallowed be your name," bridging the gulf between transcendence and immanence. Asking for daily bread affirms reliance on the sacred source for our needs, material, emotional, and spiritual. It echoes the Buddhist principle of mindful receiving, where we take only what is necessary and do so with gratitude. The prayer's emphasis on forgiveness stands out across faith lines as well. In the Hindu tradition, surrender, Ishvara Pranidhana, fosters a letting go of grievances and illusions of control, opening the heart to the divine presence that reconciles all differences. Jesus then counsels us to store up treasures in heaven rather than hoard treasures on earth. This admonition resonates with the Vedantic understanding of Maya, the ephemeral nature of worldly pursuits that can ensnare us in illusion. The Abrahamic faiths too acknowledge the transience of temporal power. For all that we cherish, wealth, status, success, fades with time. The only abiding riches lie in the qualities of heart and spirit. Compassion, wisdom, and the capacity to love unconditionally. By anchoring ourselves in the eternal, we liberate our minds from endless anxiety and craving. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. With these words, the Sermon on the Mount takes an unflinching look at the phenomenon of worry. Stress and uncertainty can overshadow our awareness of the present moment. In Zen Buddhism, practitioners cultivate zazen, sitting meditation, to awaken to the richness of now, relinquishing the mind's obsessive wandering into past regrets or future fears. In Taoism, the ideal is to flow spontaneously with the Tao, unburdened by speculative anxieties. Jesus' call to trust divine providence echoes these sentiments, inviting us to participate faithfully in today's duties and mysteries without succumbing to the paralysis of what-ifs. Finally, Jesus concludes the sermon with a parable of two builders. The wise one lays a foundation on rock, on spiritual truth and authentic practice, ensuring that even the fiercest storms cannot topple the structure. The foolish one builds on sand, trusting in fleeting or superficial fixes, only to see the structure collapse under life's inevitable turbulence. This vibrant image resonates through all spiritual traditions. In the disciplined stillness of Vipassana meditation, the devotee learns that only insight into impermanence and compassion can offer lasting support. In the Jewish tradition, building on the rock of Torah or divine law implies anchoring in an unshakable covenant. In Sufism, the rock is love of the beloved, an anchor in the boundless sea of existence. Ultimately, it is not dogma but actualized wisdom and compassion that form the stable ground on which our life can stand. What does all this mean for us today, in a world so often marked by division, rush, and distraction? The Sermon on the Mount gently beckons us to embody a spirituality that transcends cultural and historical boundaries, rooted in simple yet transformative truths. It presents a blueprint for living from the inside out, allowing love, empathy, and faith to guide our relationships and shape our priorities. Can we cultivate the humility of the poor in spirit, recognizing that we do not have all the answers and opening ourselves to daily revelations of grace? Can we hold the world's suffering in a spirit of mourning that awakens compassion rather than despair? Are we able to channel meekness, the gentle yet enduring strength that surrenders control in order to cooperate with life's deeper currents? Will we pursue righteousness with the same urgency that we chase our own personal desires, so that our hunger for what is right becomes a transformative force within us? What might it look like in our context to practice mercy, seeing the divine spark in each person we encounter, including those with whom we vehemently disagree? Can our hearts attain the purity to perceive divinity in the ordinary? The smile of a neighbor, the trees swaying in the breeze, the quietness of dawn. Will we dare to become peacemakers, bridging chasms of misunderstanding and hostility in a spirit of patience and love? And if we face persecution, be it subtle ridicule or overt oppression, will we find the resilience to remain anchored in truth, trusting that no external circumstance can ever uproot the spiritual foundation we have laid? As we consider the vast tapestry of spiritual teachings, Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Taoist, indigenous traditions, we notice that what often differs are the symbols, narratives, and historical expressions, while the essential call to compassion, surrender, and wisdom remains remarkably consistent. This unity within diversity is part of the miracle of the human search for the sacred. The Sermon on the Mount, therefore, can be seen not merely as a Christian text, but as a universal beacon, illuminating the path for all who yearn to live from a place of profound love. May these reflections spark your own deeper engagement with the Sermon on the Mount, whether you approach it as a Christian text, an interfaith seeker, or a spiritual explorer drawn by its timeless resonance. Let us walk together in the spirit of these teachings, becoming salt that preserves and light that illumines the way. Let us share our bread with the hungry, physical or spiritual, and extend our hearts to the lonely. Let us devote ourselves to a love so radical it dares to encompass even those we label enemies. In so doing, we participate in a transformative conversation that spans centuries, weaving us into the vibrant community of souls striving to manifest kindness and peace on this fragile, beautiful earth. Thank you for accompanying us on this much longer journey through the Sermon on the Mount in sacred texts summarized. May the blessings of humility, compassion, and unshakable love guide your steps. And may the sacred presence, however you name it, shine ever more brightly within you and through you. Until next time, may your path be illumined by wisdom, grounded in humility, and softened by grace, leading you ever closer to the source of all that is good and true.